Very much. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. And welcome to the last speech of our practice session, September 30th, 2023. Thank you for our organizers, as always. Today, I will be talking about UN peacekeeping. As you remember, we already had a speech on US peacekeeping today. But now, by now, you are more or less familiar with the history of the UN peacekeeping forces. But rather than glorifying UN efforts in this area, I will focus on a rather controversial issue. I would say a stain on the reputation of the UN peacekeeping forces. I am referring to multiple allegations of sexual abuse and exploitation, which affects women and children. But first, let me briefly remind you about the history of UN peacekeeping. As the previous speaker mentioned, since 1948, the UN has deployed over 70 peacekeeping operations all over the world, with hundreds of thousands of military and civilian personnel from more than 120 countries. More than 3,000 UN peacekeepers were killed while serving under the UN flag. At the beginning, the primary objective of the UN peacekeeping forces was to provide support for political efforts to resolve conflict by peaceful means. Their job was to maintain ceasefire and to help stabilize the situation on the ground. Early peacekeeping missions consisted of unarmed military observers and lightly armed troops who had monitoring, reporting, and confidence-building roles. The first two peacekeeping missions were deployed by the UN in 1948. One of them was the UN Truce Supervision Organization, or UNTSO. The mission's role was to monitor the armistice agreement between Israel and the neighboring Arab countries. The other one was the UN Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan. The first armed peacekeeping mission was deployed in 1956 to help resolve the Suez Crisis. Hostilities broke out when Israel, the UK, and France invaded Egypt in response to the Egyptian government nationalizing the Suez Canal Company. The purpose of that mission, known as the First UN Emergency Force, or UNEF-1, was to secure and supervise the cessation of hostilities, which also included the withdrawal of the armed forces of France, Israel, and the UK from Egypt. And after the withdrawal, to serve as a buffer between the Egyptian and Israeli forces. Canadian External Affairs Minister at the time, Lester B. Pearson, played a vital role in resolving the Suez Crisis. In fact, he is considered one of the fathers of the modern-day UN peacekeeping. For his efforts and for his contribution to resolving the crisis, the Canadian minister was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1957. The selection committee argued that he had saved the world. But unfortunately, not all history of UN peacekeeping is so glorious. And here I'm moving on to the main topic of my speech. I'm sure all of you have read about allegations of sexual abuse and exploitation perpetrated by UN peacekeepers. The issue goes back to at least 1996. At the time, a UN study on the impact of armed conflict on children stated that in many cases, the arrival of peacekeeping troops had been associated with a rise in child prostitution. Since that time, there have been numerous reports of incidents of sexual abuse and exploitation by UN peacekeepers all over the world. During the conflict in former Yugoslavia in the late 90s, members of the UN peacekeeping force were directly involved in human trafficking and the procurement of sex slaves for local brothels. These events were later portrayed in the Canadian movie The Whistleblower that came out in 2010. The movie is telling the story of a female police officer from Nebraska. She was recruited as a UN peacekeeper for a mission in post-war Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1999. After discovering the sex ring, she spent several years trying to bring the perpetrators to justice. Similar problems existed in other regions. In 2017, the Associated Press published the results of an investigation that found that between 2005 and 2017, there were nearly 2,000 allegations of sexual abuse and exploitation by peacekeepers around the world, with 300 of these allegations involving children. To add an insult to some pretty devastating injury, even if the perpetrators are reported, they rarely face any significant consequences, such as jail time. For example, according to the Associated Press, from 2004 to 2007, at least 134 Sri Lankan UN peacekeepers stationed in Haiti as part of the UN stabilization mission sexually abused at least 9 children. One of the victims told investigators that from age 12 to 15, she had sex with almost 50 peacekeepers in exchange for some money or food. The investigators obtained a UN internal report that said that 114 peacekeepers were sent home, but none was ever imprisoned. Overall, over the course of the mission in Haiti, between 2004 and 2016, there were about 150 allegations of sexual abuse and exploitation by UN peacekeepers. Apart from Sri Lanka, alleged abusers came from Bangladesh, Brazil, Jordan, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Uruguay. The UN has been criticized for not taking this issue seriously enough. Until 2015, it would not even disclose alleged perpetrators' nationalities. The problem is further complicated by the fact that legally, the UN has no jurisdiction over peacekeepers. So it is up to their countries of origin to prosecute them. In the course of its investigation, the Associated Press repeatedly contacted 23 countries trying to find out how many peacekeepers face such allegations and what was done to investigate. Very few nations responded to their repeated requests, and those who did said the names of those found guilty were kept confidential. In 2017, Secretary General Antonio Guterres finally vowed to get the UN's own house in order. He unveiled a strategy focused not only on ending impunity, but also on prioritizing victims' rights and dignity. He appointed the UN's first victims' rights advocate and created a trust fund to support victims. But despite these efforts, the problem has not gone away. As recently as June 2023, it was reported that an entire unit of 60 peacekeepers from Tanzania were to be sent back home from the Central African Republic, where they were stationed as part of the MINUSCA peacekeeping mission, following serious allegations of sexual exploitation and abuse. A preliminary investigation found credible evidence that 11 members of the unit sexually abused and exploited 4 victims. In this case, however, the Tanzanian authorities noted the seriousness of these allegations and committed to taking the necessary steps to address the problem. Many people believe that one way to rectify the situation is to increase the number of female peacekeepers in all positions. It is believed that women in peacekeeping are a key to peace for a number of reasons. First, gender-based peacekeeping forces better reflect the communities that they serve. Gender diversity allows engagement with all members of the communities they're meant to protect. Second, women peacekeepers can gain better access to the population, including women and children. Women can interview and support survivors of gender-based violence and violence against children, thereby providing critical information that would otherwise be difficult to obtain. Third, women peacekeepers are essential for building trust and confidence with local communities. They can help improve access and support for local women, especially in those societies and cultures where women are prohibited from speaking to men. Furthermore, women peacekeepers play an essential role in post-conflict settings. For example, they bring new perspectives and solutions while addressing the needs of women ex-fighters and child soldiers during the process of their demobilizing and their reintegration into civilian life. And finally, women peacekeepers serve as mentors and role models for women and girls in post-conflict settings in the host country or the host community. They set wonderful examples for them and inspire them to advocate for their own rights and pursue non-traditional careers. Now, personally, I'm a firm believer in gender parity, and I'm against gender segregation in any context, from professional activities to baby showers and stag parties. And I believe that in addition to the benefits mentioned above, the presence of women peacekeepers may help reduce instances of sexual abuse and exploitation, and not only because there would be naturally fewer male officers. Research has shown that gender segregation in the workplace contributes to sexual harassment. One study, for example, has found that in male-dominated workplaces, women are twice as likely to be harassed than in workplaces that have an equal number of men and women. Female-dominated workplaces pose similar risks for men. Of course, this research does not explore gender dynamics in conflict settings, where relationships are marked by much greater power imbalance and involve highly vulnerable individuals. But its basic results may be applicable in such contexts as well, namely that a more naturally gender-balanced group would exhibit a more civilized behavior towards each other as well as towards those they're supposed to protect. The UN has been working on increasing the number of women peacekeepers for almost a decade now. In 2015, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2242 on strategies and resources regarding the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. In 2018, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres launched the Uniform Gender Parity Strategy. The goal of those efforts is to double the number of women in uniformed components of peace operations, including key positions, by 2028. However, despite these efforts, the progress has been slow. Currently, only 7.8% of all uniformed military, police, justice, and corrections personnel in field missions are women. As of 2022, the figures are as follows. The top 5 countries contributing women military personnel in missions worldwide are Ethiopia, 538 women, Ghana, 268 women, Rwanda, 244 women, Nepal, 234, and Bangladesh, 225. The top 5 countries contributing women police personnel are Rwanda, 227, Senegal with 148, Bangladesh with 146, Nepal with 63, and Egypt with 59 women. As you see, these numbers do not inspire confidence that the gender gap in UN peacekeeping will be closed by 2028. But let us hope that eventually these efforts will bear fruit, and UN peacekeepers will only be known for their courage, integrity, and commitment to peace. Thank you.
Nunca lo grabé. Viva la patria.